Welcome to From Our Families to Yours, Parent Insights on Reading Instruction at Lindamood-Bell. I'm Dave Hungerford, the Director of Visual Media for Lindamood-Bell, and I'm here today with the Nations family, both Abbie and Beth, and they're going to share their story about their journey with Lindamood-Bell. Hi, guys.
Hi, Dave.
So we will, for those of you watching, we have people online if you want to text in Facebook or on Zoom that can answer any questions during this episode as we talk. Feel free to do that. But first, I want to meet both Beth and Abbie. And Beth, tell us a little bit about what you do at Lindamood-Bell and your journey and your family.
Absolutely. So my career with Lindamood-Bell began 23 years ago now, and I was a clinician. I thought that it would be a summer job for me, and I just could not get over the kind of gains we were able to make with students in such a short period of time. And so I never left. And so I enjoyed many roles in learning centers, and now I'm honored to be the director of the Learning Center division at Lindamood-Bell. And this is Abbie, as you mentioned. She is the oldest of four sisters who are all teenagers.
And Abbie, where are you in your academic journey right now?
I've just finished high school and I'm going off to university.
Oh, great. And so what are some of the things that you like to do with your free time?
I really enjoy things that I can focus on. It helps bring me peace of mind. I really enjoy gardening, decorating, and baking. I've also done vocal lessons, ballroom dancing, and theater.
Oh, nice. And why don't you tell us a little bit about, we're going to get to some instruction that you've had with Lindamood-Bell, but tell us about your journey along all of your academic career.
My academic career has been fun. I've always thought it's been pretty much on the medium. It hasn't been awful, but it hasn't been valedictorian level. I've always enjoyed school because I really enjoy learning. The classroom sometimes is difficult for me because of ADHD and some math disability, but I really do enjoy learning. So it's always been a lot of fun for me.
And reading came easy for you early on?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. What particular subjects, we said some math issues, were there any other subjects that were challenging?
I had dyscalculia and I really enjoyed science until they added math into science. And I really, really love history and literature.
Beth, you've worked in several roles in Lindamood-Bell, and so you're probably very familiar with kind of the natural arc of students' progress academically. Was there anything that stood out for Abbie that made you stand back and look at something and question it?
And not for a very long time in her academic career. I feel very fortunate to have worked at Lindamood-Bell even before my children were born. So I sort of knew ways to help them as they were even first acquiring language and reading skills. And as Abbie mentioned, reading wasn't a challenge for her, but as she started to get into those higher grades and AP level honors classes, it's just harder material. And so I think it started to feel a little bit different for you. Is that true?
I agree. I remember being in AP literature, and I've always loved literature, and it's come naturally to me. It became harder for me to focus and comprehend what was happening in the novels. I could not tell you the characters' names at a certain point, and I believe Lindamood-Bell truly helped me with that. It got to the point where I could comprehend it well enough to tell you the color of the flowers that they passed.
So what was the conversation when you finally got to the point where, okay, let's go in for the testing and evaluation?
So we actually did evaluations throughout Abbie's childhood. I had all my kids test about every other year just so I could keep track with how they were doing and if anything was getting too challenging. And so Abbie was used to that process.
So, Abbie, you went in for the evaluation this time. What was that process like? How would you describe it to somebody that's not gone through the testing process?
I would explain it as you get to sit down with a clinician and you get to play really fun games because that's honestly what I thought it was for most of my life. My entire childhood, I went and took these tests once a summer and I looked forward to it all summer. It was one of my favorite things to do. And when I became older and realized that it was an evaluation, I still thought it was really fun. Despite certain test anxieties, I was always really comfortable with my clinician and with the certain activities that they had me doing. I really enjoyed it.
And Beth, I'm guessing you had access to the results. What did that evaluation show?
I did. I saw them as quickly as they could be scored. So Abby was on track as she always had been with vocabulary and reading skills. And her comprehension wasn't a huge red flag. It wasn't below the normal range statistically, but it was a little bit lower than her vocabulary and her reading accuracy rate and fluency. And so I wanted to address that so that she wouldn't feel that distinction between reading being easy, but not, fully able to comprehend, understand, or recall what she read.
And so our programs that we use are categorically work for several areas in language processing. Which program, and maybe you could talk about that program and describe it, did they use with Abbie?
Sure. So Abby did instruction with the visualizing and verbalizing program, and that works on language comprehension and higher order thinking skills. It's a program that connects language and imagery. That's really the basis of what it's doing. And so it's a program that was built by Nancy Bell very experientially in terms of she worked with students who could read, but they couldn't understand what they were reading. And even today, sometimes comprehension is taken for granted in the educational world. People just think, well, if somebody can read, then of course they're going to understand what they're reading. But that's certainly not the case. And we see that frequently at Lindamood-Bell. So Abby did the visualizing and verbalizing program, and she started at the basic levels, like all of our students do, but she was quickly able to image sentences and paragraphs. Now, of course, at Lindamood-Bell, we see students of all ages and all skill levels. And so some students have trouble imaging even a sentence like the white horse galloped on the green grass and jumped over the brown fence. You might say, what color was the horse? And they might say green, because that was the color word that they heard that stuck out to them. And so the visualizing and verbalizing program starts at the base level and then works all the way up to high school and adult level material, and comprehending that material, multiple paragraphs and whole pages at a time. Even though the program was developed experientially, as Nancy worked with students and saw that some could comprehend and some couldn't, and figured out that the ones who could were using mental imagery, it's also aligned with a theory of cognition. And that's very important when we are teaching students new ways to think. You want to make sure it's aligned with the theory of cognition. And the one that the VV, or visualizing and verbalizing program, is aligned with is called dual coding theory. And it talks about our brain really processing language in two ways. One is with words and one is in images. And so some of our viewers today might have heard of our Seeing Stars program. And it's the one that works on a student's ability to read and decode words, recognize sight words, spell words correctly, and then become a quick and accurate, fluent reader. And so the visualizing and verbalizing program is what helps students become a global reader, meaning the only reason any of us read is for meaning. Otherwise, we would just be doing a kind of silly word calling activity. But a global reader is able to do all the processing that it takes to recognize sight words and decode unfamiliar words, and also comprehend at the same time. And so I wanted that for Abby at a very high level that would take her into her college years and beyond.
So Abby, do you recall the instruction? Were there times that were really challenging and other times easy? What was that like for you?
I do. I recall going in for the beginning of my instruction, and I would be handed these little books, and it was like a sentence, and I'd read the sentence to my instructor, and they'd ask me to recall it, and I could tell them the sentence almost word for word. I would have to describe to them or write down what I pictured, like the colors and the shapes and everything. And eventually it got to the point where I was sat down with a computer, and I had to watch a TED Talk, like a 20-minute TED Talk, and then I would have to restate everything I remembered and comprehended during the TED Talk back to my instructor. And I always had a really good time doing that.
So what Abby's describing now is the application part of the visualizing and verbalizing process. So as a student's increasing in levels in terms of how much language we're asking them to image at once, a sentence, then multiple sentences, then paragraphs, and then a page, they're also increasing in instructional level. So Abby needed to be able to really comprehend and picture at the 11th, 12th grade level and beyond. Students can come where they actually or materials that are very similar to what they'll encounter in school, and they work through the visualizing and verbalizing steps with those materials. And so while we did instruction in the Learning Center for Abby's intensive period, which is 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, while she was really working through the basic steps of the program, she was able to do the follow-up at home online, just a couple hours a day, a couple days a week, and really apply what she learned to her schoolwork.
Great. And so I know this was after her sophomore year. You had a life-changing event not too long after that. Tell me about that. What happened?
So Abby went back to 11th grade when it started, and the first semester was pretty uneventful. And then the night of New Year's Eve, we had a house fire, and it was a total loss house fire, meaning we couldn't live there and we didn't have our same belongings anymore. And Abby unfortunately lost her very dear cat. And then after that, we're a large family. I mentioned that she's one of four, and then mom and dad. So it was hard to find a place for six people to stay while we tried to find long-term housing. And so we did a little bit of hotel staying and stayed with family. And at one point, Abby was actually living with a friend. And so, and in the friend's family, we weren't even together some of the time, just so that we would have space for everyone to be able to stay somewhere. It was a pretty traumatic life event for the girls. They were there, when it was time to call 911 and the fire trucks came, and the fire went on a very long time, and they saw all of that and knew that their cats weren't making it out. And Abby had a very understandably a long grieving process after that.
And so, Abby, how was school? Probably took a back seat to that. How did you get through that semester?
Getting through that semester was definitely one of the more difficult things I've done in my life. It became very hard to focus in class, and even after school, I would have more important things to do than certain academic things, like moving all the boxes of burn things. But I still had to prioritize homework and my schoolwork, despite how difficult it was. And having learned about the comprehension and all these skills that helped me get through the work easier, it became a lot less of a daunting mental task to go through and do it. And I was able to stay afloat throughout that year, despite everything that had happened.
That's great. And that you were able to stay afloat. And in fact, your senior year, Beth, you were saying that she had really a real strong senior year in getting prepared for college. How did that go?
She really did. The second semester of 11th grade, I would say was a bit of a wash. Abby still made grades that she can be proud of, but as she mentioned, it's hard to have your brain focused on schoolwork when you're inventorying things that you used to own and trying to figure out where you're going to stay for the next little while. But because Lindamood-Bell had given her such a strong foundation to comprehend and have an easier time taking tests, the 11th grade year was bearable, and her senior year was actually really strong. One of the things that she did in 11th grade was take the ACT, and we had always planned that we would do lots of ACT prep, and Abby really had the potential to make a great score, and so she was going to take it multiple times. And after the fire, there just wasn't really mental space for that to happen. And so she took it one time, and it's the time that the school mandates every 11th grader take the test. And fortunately, she made a 31, which has given her plenty of scholarship offers. What did you feel about your test prep part of application from visualizing and verbalizing?
I found it really helpful. It was one of the last little bits of instruction that I did was ACT prep and applied schoolwork. And we just would go through some previous test questions from other years, and instructors would help me realize what words were most important in the questions. And instead of a question being thrown at me and me feeling like I don't really know what to do with this question or this problem, I was able to step back and realize certain words were more important than others. And I knew what the question was asking me, and I knew what approach to take because the instructors had walked through that with me, and it made it a lot easier.
That's great. Well, Beth, you've seen undoubtedly hundreds, if not thousands or tens of thousands of students go through our process over the years. This was not a case of a student needing remediation. It was not to catch up, it was to get ahead. Is that pretty common in your experience and what you see with our students?
I wouldn't say that it's more common than remediation for sure, but we do get to see quite a few students who want to get ahead. Often it's actually a sibling or more than one sibling of a student who was with us for remediation. Students typically find instruction to be very enjoyable. It's a super positive environment. And so after a family knows that, they often think, well, this other child could do some math work, or it sure would help if they learned to prep for tests. And so the visualizing and verbalizing program goes all the way from, trying to picture that white horse jump over the brown fence to, as Abbie said, test prep that helps a student actually picture not just what they've already read, but what a question means. Many of our students with comprehension weakness or who just need to brush up or get ahead on comprehension have not had anyone explicitly bring that kind of imagery to consciousness. And so often, if they are not following writing prompts or if they're not answering test questions correctly, it's because maybe they don't know how to image the question. And so that's just another way that the VV, or visualizing and verbalizing program, is able to apply that imagery for language in a way that builds students' vocabulary, comprehension, and higher order thinking skills.
And Abbie, how do you feel about your upcoming university experience? You ready?
I'm really excited. I feel like I have a lot of skills that I have been working on for many years, and that will be very helpful in this new stage of my life. And I feel like I have what it takes to take on any new skills that I need to in this part of my life. And I'm really grateful for Lindamood-Bell for giving me so many tools to help me get here.
Well, you undoubtedly worked hard to get those skills yourself as well. And I want to thank you both for sharing your story. Any last words that you want to say, Beth?
I'm excited for Abbie to take what she learned from Lindamood-Bell and apply it to college. When I started my career at Lindamood-Bell decades ago, I was actually still working on my education and taking some classes. And when I got back to university classes, the first semester after I had taken this, what I thought would be a summer job, and learned to teach the visualizing and verbalizing program, I can remember exactly where I was sitting and what the classroom looked like. And I thought to myself, this feels like cheating. I had learned to image so automatically that I didn't have to take notes for most things anymore. And as soon as the test was handed to me, I could just go back to mental imagery as though I had watched a movie of what the professor was saying. And I thought, this must be some kind of cheat code. And so I'm so happy that Abbie gets to go into her undergraduate experience with those skills.
Well, Abbie, we'll wish you the best of luck, and thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, and thank you for watching. If you have any questions, you can reach us at lindamoodbell.com. Call us at 1-800-233-1819. And we're also available on all the social platforms if you want to see more stories or hear more information about Lindamood-Bell's programs and approaches. And thank you again for joining us.